My wife shocked me when I said we were strangers, but then she fought to rebuild our broken marriage with vulnerability, intimacy, and hope for us again. Around 10 p.m., I remember it vividly because the house was unusually quiet. The grandkids had gone home earlier, and for once there wasn't a pile of dishes or laundry demanding attention. She was in her usual spot, curled up on the couch with her tablet, scrolling through whatever held her attention these days. I was across the room pretending to watch TV, but my mind was racing. I couldn't keep it inside anymore. It wasn't just about loneliness or the lack of intimacy, though both weighed heavily. It was the realization that we had drifted so far apart we might as well have been living separate lives. And the scariest part? It didn't even seem to bother her. I turned off the TV, leaving the room in an uncomfortable silence. She looked up, slightly startled. "Everything okay?" she asked, her tone casual, as though my shutting off the noise was the most unusual thing I could have done. "No," I replied, my voice sharper than I intended. She put her tablet down, now fully focused on me. I could feel my heart pounding as I struggled to find the right words. "I don't know how else to say this," I started, "but I can't keep going like this. We're not us anymore. We haven't been for a long time." Her expression shifted from curiosity to confusion, then to something I couldn't quite place. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice low and cautious. "I mean," I said, the words rushing out now, "we've become strangers, roommates at best. I don't feel like your husband anymore. I don't feel like we're even a couple. And if something doesn't change, if you can't or won't make us a priority again, I don't see a future for this marriage." There it was, laid bare. The silence that followed was suffocating. She didn't respond right away. She just sat there staring at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Part of me wanted to take it all back, to sugarcoat it or soften the blow. But I didn't. I couldn't. Finally, she spoke. "I hear you," she said quietly, almost too quietly. 3 words. That's all she gave me. Not an apology, not a defense, not even anger. Just "I hear you." I didn't know what to make of it at the time. I thought maybe she was dismissing me, or worse, placating me, so I'd drop it. "I don't think you do," I shot back, frustration bubbling to the surface. "This isn't just me venting. I'm telling you, if we keep going like this, we're done, and I don't want that. I love you, but I can't do this alone." Her eyes softened, but she still didn't say much. Instead, she nodded slowly and said, "Let me think about this. Can we talk about it tomorrow?" I wanted to scream, "Why not now?" But I didn't. Maybe because I could see something flicker in her expression, something hesitant but genuine. So I nodded and went to bed alone as usual. The next day came and went without much conversation. The same thing happened the day after. I was starting to think I'd hit a wall. But then, late that week, she brought it up herself. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began one evening. "You're right. Things haven't been good for a long time." Hearing her admit it was like a small weight lifting off my chest. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. "I want to try," she continued, her voice steady but subdued. "I don't know where to start, but I don't want us to end up like this forever. Can we figure this out together?" That moment wasn't a resolution, but it was a start, a crack in the wall that had grown between us. It wasn't the grand declaration of change I'd dreamed of, but it was real. And I clung to that shred of hope because, for the first time in years, it felt like she was listening. Like she really heard me. The night she said "I want to try" gave me hope, but it also left me thinking, how did we even get here? It wasn't a single moment or event. It was years, decades, of small, almost imperceptible shifts. And the more I reflected, the clearer it became. We didn't start out like this. In the beginning, we were inseparable, newlyweds with big dreams, plans, and a love that felt unstoppable. But then life started happening, real life. First came work, long hours to make ends meet. Then the kids. Don't get me wrong, our daughters brought immeasurable joy to our lives, but they also brought exhaustion, stress, and 1,000 reasons to put us on the back burner. For years, our days revolved around carpools, soccer games, school plays, and family dinners. We were always moving, always doing, always focused on the needs of everyone else. At first, it felt like we were in it together, a team tackling the chaos of parenthood. But somewhere along the way, we stopped being teammates and started becoming co-workers, each handling our respective tasks without really connecting. I remember one night in particular, years ago, when I came home late from work. She was sitting at the kitchen table, bills spread out in front of her, a pen in hand, looking utterly exhausted. I kissed her on the forehead and said something like, "Long day?" She nodded, but that was it. No conversation, no connection. Just a quick exchange before we both went our separate ways. That became the norm, polite, surface-level interactions that kept the household running but left our relationship in the dust. And then there was intimacy, or the lack of it. We had always been affectionate, but somewhere between the sleepless nights and the endless demands of life, that part of our marriage faded. At first it was occasional, not tonight, I'm too tired. Then weeks would pass, then months. Eventually it wasn't even a topic of discussion, it just disappeared, replaced by routines that didn't leave room for closeness. Looking back, I realized we were both guilty of letting it happen. Neither of us fought for the relationship. We just assumed things would eventually go back to how they used to be. But they didn't. The years rolled on, and we grew comfortable in our roles as parents, grandparents, and providers, everything except lovers and partners. And then there were the unspoken resentments, little things that build up over time. I resented her for what I perceived as a lack of effort to keep our connection alive. She probably resented me for the same thing. But we never talked about it. We didn't argue or fight, we just drifted. It wasn't that we didn't care about each other, we did. But the care became practical. Did you pay the bills? Did you talk to the plumber? Instead of personal. Somewhere along the way, I stopped asking how she was feeling, and maybe she stopped asking me too. When the kids moved out, I thought we'd finally have time to focus on each other again. But by then, the distance between us was so vast we didn't even know where to start. Instead of rekindling our connection, we settled into parallel lives. She had her hobbies, I had mine. We shared a house but rarely shared our thoughts. It wasn't until that Wednesday night when I finally broke down and told her how I felt that I realized just how far apart we'd grown. And the truth is, it wasn't just her who needed to change. I had a lot to reckon with too. The years of avoidance, the missed opportunities to communicate, the times I let my pride stop me from reaching out. It was all part of the same problem. Understanding how we got here wasn't easy, but it was necessary. We'd spent decades ignoring the cracks in our foundation, hoping they'd somehow fix themselves. Now we were finally facing them. It was messy and uncomfortable, but for the first time in years we weren't pretending everything was fine. We were finally talking, and that, I realized, was the first step toward fixing what had been broken for so long. Once we admitted to ourselves how far apart we'd drifted, the next step was something neither of us had done in years, really talking. Not the shallow "how was your day?" exchanges or the logistical "what time are we picking up the grandkids?" chats. This was the kind of conversation that forced us to look at things we'd buried for decades. It wasn't easy. In fact, it was some of the hardest stuff we'd ever done. It started hesitantly one evening after dinner. The TV was off, our phones were put away, and for the first time in what felt like forever, we were just sitting across from each other. I don't remember who spoke first, but I do remember how awkward it felt. We were both guarded, not quite sure how much to say or how the other would react. The first topic we tackled was the obvious one: intimacy. I was the one to bring it up, and even though I tried to phrase it carefully, I could see the discomfort flash across her face. "I know we've let that part of our marriage disappear," I said, "but I don't understand why it happened or when. It feels like it just faded, and we never talked about it." She was quiet for a moment before answering. "I don't know either," she admitted. "But I think I got so used to being tired from the kids, from work, from everything, that it felt easier to just let it go." She paused and added, "And I guess I started to assume you didn't care anymore either." That hit me harder than I expected. "Not care?" I asked, genuinely shocked. "I've always cared. I just didn't know how to bring it up without making you feel pressured or guilty." She looked at me, her expression softening. "I think we were both waiting for the other person to make the first move," she said quietly. That silence that followed was heavy, but not hostile. It was the kind of silence where you feel the weight of shared responsibility. As the days went on, the conversations deepened. We started digging into the underlying issues, the ones we'd avoided for years. I admitted that I often felt taken for granted, like my role in the relationship was just to handle things, and not to be seen or appreciated as a partner. She, in turn, shared her own feelings of being overlooked. "Sometimes it felt like you only saw me as the mom, not as me," she said. That hurt to hear, but she was right. I hadn't realized it at the time, but I'd fallen into the same trap. We both had, assuming our roles as parents and caregivers were all we were supposed to be. Somewhere in the shuffle, I stopped paying attention to the woman I married. The hardest part of these conversations wasn't just admitting our mistakes. It was hearing the ways we'd hurt each other, often unintentionally. I hadn't realized how much my withdrawal, my focus on work, or even my silences had affected her. And she hadn't known how her seeming indifference, her retreat into hobbies and routines, had left me feeling abandoned. There were moments when the conversations turned into arguments. Painful words were exchanged, and at times it felt like we were opening old wounds without knowing how to close them again. But for the first time in years, we weren't shutting down or walking away. We stayed. We kept talking, even when it hurt. One night, after a particularly intense conversation, she said something that stayed with me. "I think we both forgot how to be vulnerable with each other," she said. "And it's scary to try again after so long." She was right. Vulnerability was terrifying. It meant admitting not just where we'd gone wrong, but also what we needed from each other moving forward. For me, it meant saying things like, "I need to feel wanted again." For her, it meant admitting, "I need to feel safe opening up without fear of being judged." These conversations weren't a magic fix. They didn't suddenly erase decades of distance or repair everything that was broken, but they were a beginning. For the first time, we were facing the hard truths together instead of avoiding them in silence. And that, as uncomfortable as it was, felt like progress. After weeks of difficult, raw conversations, we reached a turning point. It wasn't dramatic or flashy, but it was unmistakable. One evening, after yet another conversation where we were unpacking years of unspoken feelings, she looked at me and said, "I want to make us a priority again. I don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but I mean it." Those words hit differently because for the first time, I could see she wasn't just saying them to appease me. There was intent behind them. My wife is a woman of action, always has been. So when she decides to focus on something, she dives in completely. And true to her nature, she didn't just leave it at words, she started showing me. It began with small things. The next morning, she surprised me by joining me on my usual walk. I'd been taking those walks alone for years, ever since I retired. She always said she'd join me someday, but it never happened. But that morning, there she was, lacing up her sneakers as I grabbed my jacket. I didn't even know what to say. We didn't talk much on that walk, but the silence felt different, comfortable. It wasn't just me anymore. Then she started planning time for us, actual time, not squeezed in between errands or obligations, but intentional time. One weekend, she suggested we go out for lunch, just the two of us. It wasn't a big deal on the surface, but when we sat down at the little cafe she'd picked, I realized it was the first time in years we'd been on a date. We laughed, we talked about random things, and for a moment it felt like we were rediscovering the people we used to be. Of course, it wasn't all easy. One night, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, she turned to me and said, "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" I asked. She hesitated, then said, "Reconnect. Be a wife again, not just your partner in life or the mother of our kids." Hearing her say that brought a lump to my throat because it showed me how much this was weighing on her too. "We'll figure it out together," I said, and that became our mantra. We started sharing more of the little things. Instead of just asking, "How was your day?" she began to tell me about hers in detail. What she enjoyed, what annoyed her, what made her laugh. I realized how much I'd missed hearing those things. I also started doing the same, sharing my thoughts and feelings, even when they felt trivial. Slowly, the walls we'd built over the years started to come down. One of the most meaningful moments came a few weeks later. She walked into the living room with a photo album, one of those old ones we hadn't touched in years. "Do you remember this trip?" she asked, flipping to a page with pictures from a vacation we'd taken before the kids were born. We sat there for hours going through memories and laughing at how young and carefree we looked. It reminded us both of who we were before life got in the way. The changes weren't just about spending time together, though. She also made a conscious effort to show appreciation for me, and I tried to do the same for her. One evening, I came home from running errands to find dinner on the table, candles lit, and music playing. "I thought we could have a quiet night in," she said with a shy smile. It was a simple gesture, but it meant the world to me. It wasn't all perfect, of course. There were days when we slipped back into old habits, moments when the effort felt forced or awkward. But what mattered was that she was trying, and so was I. We were learning how to prioritize each other in a way we hadn't done in decades. For the first time in years, I felt like I was part of something again. Not just a marriage on autopilot, but a real living partnership. And as small as those moments of progress seemed, they were monumental to me. They weren't just gestures, they were promises. Promises that we were in this together no matter how long it took to find our way back. With small but steady changes becoming part of our lives, we began to venture into the deeper waters of truly rebuilding what had been lost. The effort wasn't just about spending time together anymore. It was about rediscovering who we were, not just as individuals, but as a couple. And let me tell you, that was a process filled with challenges, surprises, and even moments of humor. One of the hardest parts was unlearning some of the habits we had formed over the years. Habits that had created distance between us. For instance, I'd grown so used to doing things on my own that I struggled to let her back in. Simple things like making decisions about the house or our plans had become second nature for me to handle alone. When she started showing interest again, I caught myself resisting it at first. I wasn't doing it on purpose, it was just hard to adjust after years of independence. The same was true for her. She admitted one night that she found it difficult to let her guard down around me. "It's not that I don't trust you," she said. "It's that I forgot what it feels like to be vulnerable with you." That hit me hard because it was a reminder of how much work we still had to do. Not just to fix the surface-level issues, but to rebuild the trust and closeness that had eroded over time. One thing that helped was trying new things together, things neither of us had done before. She suggested we take a dance class. I thought she was joking at first because, let's be honest, I'm not exactly Fred Astaire. But she wasn't joking. "It's something we've never done," she said. "Maybe it'll be fun. Maybe it'll be terrible. Either way, we'll be doing it together." It turned out to be a little of both. I stepped on her toes more times than I could count, and we laughed until our sides hurt. But it wasn't really about the dancing. It was about stepping out of our comfort zones and creating new memories together. It felt like a fresh start in a way I didn't think was possible. There were also setbacks. Old patterns don't disappear overnight, and there were moments when we slipped back into the comfortable but distant routines we'd grown accustomed to. One weekend, after a particularly busy week, we found ourselves sitting in the same room, completely absorbed in our own separate worlds, me on my phone, her with a book. The silence was deafening. It was a wake-up call that even though we were making progress, we still had to consciously choose to stay connected. But then there were the moments that made it all worth it, like the night she suggested we cook dinner together. Cooking had always been her domain. I stayed out of the kitchen unless I was making coffee or grabbing a snack. But that night we chopped vegetables, argued over the recipe, and laughed when the sauce came out too salty. It wasn't about the food. It was about finding joy in something as simple as preparing a meal side by side. The intimacy began to return too, slowly but surely. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional. We started holding hands again, sharing kisses that didn't feel obligatory, and looking at each other in ways we hadn't in years. It was like discovering a new layer of our relationship, one that had been hidden under years of routine and neglect. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, she turned to me and said, "I feel like I'm getting to know you all over again." That moment stuck with me because I realized I felt the same way. It wasn't just about fixing what was broken. It was about building something new from the pieces, something stronger, more intentional. We weren't perfect, and we still aren't. But the effort, the laughter, the hard conversations, they all added up to something real. For the first time in a long time, it felt like we were truly a team again. And while the path wasn't always smooth, it was ours, and we were walking it together. The work didn't stop. If anything, it became more deliberate. We had laid the foundation, but building on it required us to keep showing up for each other every single day. And honestly, some days were harder than others. There were moments when our old habits tried to creep back in. A disagreement over something small, what to have for dinner, whose turn it was to pick up the dry cleaning, would sometimes snowball into silence. In the past, that silence could last for days, but now we both made the effort to address it. "Are we really arguing about this?" she'd ask. Or I'd say, "Let's not let this turn into something it's not." It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. One of the biggest shifts was how we started talking about the future. For years, our conversations about the future were always about the kids or the grandkids, what school they were attending, who was graduating next, how we'd help them with this or that. We had stopped envisioning a future for us. That changed. One evening over dinner, she asked me, "Where do you see us in 5 years?" It was such a simple question, but it floored me, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I hadn't realized how long it had been since we thought about us like that. We started dreaming again about traveling, about spending more time doing the things we love, about what life could look like when we were fully focused on each other. We took some small steps to bring those dreams to life. We booked a weekend trip to a cabin, just the two of us. It was our first getaway in years, and it felt like a glimpse of what life could be if we kept prioritizing our relationship. We walked through the woods, talked late into the night, and laughed at how out of shape we were trying to hike a steep trail. It wasn't grand or glamorous, but it was exactly what we needed. Another thing we started doing was making time for simple rituals, things that brought us closer in the day-to-day. Every morning we'd have coffee together on the porch. It became our time to connect before the distractions of the day set in. We'd talk about our plans, share funny memories, or just sit in comfortable silence, enjoying each other's presence. Intimacy, both emotional and physical, continued to grow. It wasn't always easy. It required vulnerability and trust that we were still rebuilding, but it was real. We stopped seeing it as something we should do and started seeing it as something we wanted to do. It felt like rediscovering each other in a way that was new and exciting, even after all these years. The most important thing, though, was the mindset shift. We both stopped taking the relationship for granted. We made a conscious effort to appreciate the little things, her laughing at one of my bad jokes, the way she'd squeeze my hand during a quiet moment, the way we'd dance in the kitchen when a good song came on. Those small moments became the glue that held everything together. Looking back, I realized there was no single moment when everything changed. It wasn't about one grand gesture or one breakthrough conversation. It was about the accumulation of all those little choices. The choice to listen, to be patient, to try again even when it felt difficult. We're not perfect, and we're not finished. But we're happy, genuinely happy, in a way we haven't been in a long time. And as I sit here now, reflecting on everything we've been through, I know one thing for sure. We're not the same people we were when we first fell in love. And that's okay. Because what we've built now is stronger, more intentional, and more meaningful than anything we had before. We're still learning, still growing, and still choosing each other every day. And that, to me, is the real victory. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. Looking back on it all, I sometimes sit on the porch at dusk, just like we do now, her hand resting in mine, and I'm still amazed that we made it through. There was a night not so long ago when I honestly believed our story was over. I could feel the emptiness in the house even when she was sitting 10 feet away. I thought love had quietly died of neglect, and that the kindest thing would be to bury it and walk away before resentment turned into bitterness. But something shifted the moment she said, "I want to try." Those 4 small words cracked open a door I had already started nailing shut. And when she actually started trying, when she laced up her sneakers for that first walk, when she reached for my hand in the movie theater like a shy teenager, when she cried in my arms and admitted she was terrified of failing at us again, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades, hope that tasted like the very beginning. I felt young again, not in body, but in spirit. There are still days when the old habits creep in. I catch myself retreating into silence, or she pulls out her tablet and disappears into her own world for a moment. But now we notice. We catch it early. One of us will say, "Hey, come back to me," and the other answers, "I'm right here." That simple exchange is a small miracle every single time. I'm prouder of this chapter of our marriage than of the honeymoon phase everyone romanticizes. Back then, love was easy. It fell into our laps like summer rain. Now love was easy. It fell into our laps like summer rain. Now love is deliberate. It's choosing every single day to turn toward her instead of away. It's deciding that being known is worth the risk of being seen. Flaws, fears, and all. It's laughing at how terrible we both are at dancing, yet still showing up to class because we promised each other we would. I used to think the goal was to get back to who we were at 25. I was wrong. The goal was to become better versions of who we are at 75, wiser, softer, braver, still curious about each other. And we're doing it. Not perfectly, but honestly. Sometimes she falls asleep on my shoulder during a movie, and I sit there afraid to move because I don't want the moment to end. I listen to her breathing and I think, this is what I almost lost. This ordinary, extraordinary woman who still makes my heart stumble after 50 years. This life we almost threw away because we forgot how to fight for it. I'm grateful every single day that we woke up in time. Grateful for the hard conversations, the awkward silences we finally broke, the tears, the laughter, the slow, stubborn refusal to let good enough be the end of our story. If I could tell that broken-hearted man from a year ago one thing, it would be this. Love isn't something that happens to you once and then you're done. It's something you keep choosing, over and over, until it becomes the best habit of your life.